Good morning, and thank you very much for joining me this morning to look at how Cim200 stock control looks like. So my name is Juuso Santi. Some of you might know me, and I look after the Cim200 solution here at Cim. So this morning I will go through some slides to display stock control additions to standard Sage stock control, and I will then finish off with showing how they look like. It shouldn't take more than half an hour, but I do know that when I get into the solution in itself, I might get carried away at some point. But I try to keep it quite high level, brief, and show how it looks like. So Cim200 utilizes standard Sage 200 stock control, but adds new functionality and enhances existing. So some of the functionality crosses over between the modules, but today I'm focusing on a stock control only, with some mentions to other modules that they might touch. So our focus was always, when we were designing Cim200, to retain the look and feel of Sage 200 and to improve the workflows and giving users information on their fingertips. And all of that starts with stock profile. So stock profile is really a one-stop shop of information to give you information of all stock movements of a stock item. And it is accessible from numerous screens within Cim200, but I will show you a little bit more in a moment. One area where Cim200 is adding functionality to standard stock control is quality control with quarantine inspections. So the stock will be locked into a quarantine warehouse until the inspection has been completed. And there is an option to have multiple different quarantine locations to reflect true multi-site situations, and also allowing stock to be excluded from MRP replenishments or included depending on how you want to handle that stock. And that might depend how the stock found their way into the quarantine, whether it was transferred damaged stock or purchase order receipt, which you might want to include as a expected replenishment. Another addition to Sage functionality is goods in transit, where you can define a transfer time from one location to another. Say you have a central warehouse and a showroom, the stock will need to be transferred by a courier from central warehouse, and it can take 5 days to transport. You will be able to then see what stock is expected, what has been dispatched, and what is expected to arrive and when. And MRP can recommend stock transfers taking into account the transfer times, saying that you have to transfer something tomorrow in order to get it on time to the destination. Rapid entry movements is a new screen and enhances standard Sage stock movements by allowing users to perform multi-line transfers, stock additions, stock write-offs, and internal issues on a multi-line manner, so you don't have to do them one by one. And one more thing to mention before we go have a look at the solution is the audit log. So that takes a record of any changes to the stock item, bills of materials, or works orders, and most changes to sales orders and purchase orders. So the list will show who changed and what and when. So it takes a snapshot of that and gives you a old value and a new value, but we'll look into that as well in a second, how it actually looks like. So, my opinion, the few features I just mentioned are some of the highlights, but let's have a look how they look and feel, and I will also show some other stock item enhancements in Cim200. So hopefully you find a familiar Sage 200 screen here. And if I go into stock control and I start with the stock list. So I have already filtered it. So you could see there is a standard Sage, standard looking Sage list view. And we have included all the columns available in standard Sage, but we have also added fields of our enhancements onto the stock item. So we can see we have quite a lot of planning enhancements, but we look into those as well. We got by products, quarantine, selections, and that sort of things, as well as superseded by and supersedes, which we'll run through in a second as well. But what I like to do, because I like my coffees and espressos, is to take an example of my espresso machine. And what I mentioned first is the stock profile, which is a really powerful screen. So, like I say, it is a one-stop shop of all the stock transactions for that item. So you can see what the stock quantities are, how many of that is free stock, if you have any purchase orders, when they are requested to be delivered, if you have any sales orders, when they are expected to come in. So we have the requested and promised delivery dates, as well as if we have multiple lines on a sales order. From here, we can actually go and view these orders. So I would say there's an espresso machine, so I can view it from here on the line. We could also go back into the stock profile, so you can have access to that on a quote and sales order entry side of things. But you can go and view any orders, whether they are purchase orders, sales orders, or works orders that require that item. We also display if you have any in quarantine, how they made their way into the quarantine, so whether they're manually transferred or through purchase orders or from the works orders. And I also touched in on a goods in transit, so you can view what is moved on into goods in transit. And real-time stock projection will give you a running total of all the confirmed orders. So if you have any purchase orders, works orders, sales orders already raised, they will be taken into account for the expected dates, as well as a goods in transit can be shown as a replenishment for a warehouse. So this can be filtered by a warehouse. So give you running totals, all the expected quantities within that location. So there are different transactions for different warehouses for different quantities. And on my committed orders, it checks a negative quantity. So I would be pretty sure MRP would be asking to raise some purchase orders to get that stock level back in. Okay. On commercial side of things, we display some of the history. So we can see how many you have bought or made and their values, and also how much you have sold of this item, and the cost price variance graph on the bottom just to display what it is. And you can view it for either for last 12 months or any financial year that you want to filter it for. From here, as we're talking about history, we can also go and view the historical transactions of this stock item. And this is again standard stock item history screen, but we have added the warehouse and overall quantities here, so we can go and see, okay, what was our stock position on let's say on the 14th of August of last year, rather than going through the transactions and making the calculations and deductions and additions working backward. You can see that we had 149 in our warehouse location, as well as 22 in quarantine. day later, I had another 10 in a quarantine because that's coming in. And from here, you can also go and view the stock record. But if I leave that on a background and I just go into amend stock items, so I can actually open up some drop downs and such like. But firstly, we have a standard stock item details tab. But I mentioned we have included quite a lot of MRP settings. So this is how MRP will provide you the recommendations. So for instance, here we had a look into this on the planning webinar, so you might want to go and review that. But there is also sort of like multiples of reorder quantity or minimum order quantities plus order multiples. And these order multiples is something that wouldn't be available in the standard Sage. And some other features as well. Another nice addition is a stock item alerts. So and these can be made to pop up text, for instance, on a purchase order entry. And whenever I'm using this on a purchase order, this message will pop up for a user to confirm. Audit log, I mentioned any transactions. So I just added a new purchase order stock alert. So that's been audited. And then any other transactions, for instance, here, aggregation methods being changed from aggregating demand to no aggregation, different inspection types, quantities, any change to the stock item record will be audit logged, showing who did it when and what values were added. You have access to the commercial stuff that we just had a look at from here as well. But what is quite nice is that you can actually start utilizing your customer part numbers. So if your customer sometimes orders it using their own customer number, you can actually use those on a quotation and sales order entries. So you don't have to go and try to convert that using spreadsheets or something like that. Quality control, we'll look into it a little bit more in a moment, but this is handled on the stock item level. And you can say, okay, this goes into a quarantine on whenever you receive a purchase order. You can also set that that goes in every single time you have a parcel type. It will you will inspect a certain percentage or quantity of this item. Again, byproducts, new functionality in Cim. You could add that every time you receive an espresso machine, you will receive batch of espresso machines. Though you might have 10, so you always receive one. They might come on a pallet. You want to bring that pallet into stock or something else. It can be anything, but it could be also a percentage of receipt, or every time you receive one, you can have one of those to come in. So this item, when let's say a purchase order comes in, this stock item as a default would come into stock at 0 cost, but it might be something that you will be able to sell. So it could be scrap metal of the works order, for instance. On the supplier side of things, we have a little bit of a addition. So you could display on stock item supplier level OTIF percentage for the previous 12 months. But in addition to that, we also are starting to mark down how many kilograms of CO2 equivalents has been produced by you purchasing this item. And those ones will then feed into your manufacturing carbon footprint calculations. And also supplier price breaks. So if you can get quantity discounts from your supplier, you can go and have a look at that. Also, on locations, we have enhanced the warehouse hierarchy. So you can have a, let's say, factory to make this item. So you can have components from warehouse location, and that by building up that warehouse hierarchy, if you're using multiple sites, you can actually say which warehouses can replenish which manufacturing warehouses, for instance. Well, over here, you can see the goods in transit, which is another functionality in Cim200, like I mentioned, is an additional warehouse. As well, so is the quarantine. I only have one quarantine warehouse in this, but let's have a look into these next. So we can have the stock items to go into the goods in transit in by transferring stock. So if I would do a rapid entry so you can see how that works. So it works exactly the same way for adding stock, writing off stock, and stock transfers, as well as internal issues. But I can put a date, let's say 29th, and these are defaults that will feed down. Let's say I will need something from warehouse into my showroom, like we talked about. And let's transfer some of my espresso machine, and you can see the references come through. It filters when are you dispatching, how many I can dispatch. So if I say transfer 10, I can then go and transfer other item. I transfer 13 of those. And let's transfer some of these. There is some sort of a warning. Okay, so it would just warn you that the stock quantity in your originating warehouse will fall behind reorder level, but we are fine with that. We wanted that. And then you can have a report detail in the transaction. And we can see all the transfers in and out. And of course, this report can be customized to suit you. Good. So we saw that we did a goods in transit transaction there. We can then go into the core goods in transit area where we can filter. So let's say my receiving warehouse is showroom, because that's where we did that. And we can see these are transferred today. Expected arrival is the 1st, because I have 5 days of transfer time there. Also, these ones are expected to be transferred on the 29th. So my expected arrival date would be the 6th of May. And then you can select, okay, I have received 10 of those, 5 of those, and so forth. And then we get the goods received note that we have received those items into stock. Okay. Right. So then we have a look. We had a quarantine warehouse as well, and that was in a quality control. But again, this feeds into a different, let's close this, into a quality control area. So I have a quarantine list, and it will tell you how it made its way into the quarantine, what the status is, how many you need to inspect, how many is awaiting inspection, because you can have partial inspections like we saw. So on this one, we only need to inspect 3, but if we fail 1, it will fail all 10. We have here, it's a partially completed inspection. So let's go and have a look at that inspection record here. So we have recorded some results. These are optional on the and for the traceable items, but you can see on the results we have recorded so inspected couple this morning. There's some of them have passed, some of them have failed, but we take the individual records and you can put different notes um, onto these inspections. And you can have multiples of these questions. So you can have different parameters, for instance. So anything less, if you value is less than 10, greater than 11, can be measurements, temperatures, moisture, anything you like. And then we can have like on this one is final inspection, but this is now restricted. So we would have to select a inspector who can actually inspect it. So this would be a manager's sign off. If I didn't have that right, if I wasn't part of that group or individual, I wouldn't be able to add any results. From here, we can have visibility of what orders are needing this item. We can go view the stock item, and again, we can go and launch stock profile from here for a little bit of a fuller view of the item. So we had a couple of sales orders waiting for it. Over here, we can show the allocation status. So we saw we had 2 orders waiting for it, which would be these 2. We would be able to go and say, okay, they'd be needed on the 7th of May. Right, if I'm failing any, what's going to happen? Can I actually get a little bit more in? And I can see I have a purchase order coming in, but there's only 6 of them coming, so we might actually need a little bit more. But just gives you a view how to use stock profile in that sense. If any are rejected, we can transfer them onto an alternative location. So I would say, okay, that goes into a factory, but give a warning if it's a non-quarantine warehouse. So you can transfer them into an isolation location, for instance. Or we can create a purchase order return these items to the supplier straight away. And of course, we can put some inspection notes and attachments. If this item came from a works order, let's go and inspect that. If anywhere rejected, you can still transfer the stock, but I wouldn't be able to return it to the supplier as supplier as such. But I would be able to generate a rework works order. So when we are generating a rework works order, we will have completely new set of operations to go with it. So you might be retrimming or doing anything like that. Okay. So quite a powerful tool, and hopefully you've seen I don't have to click in and out too much. We tried to streamline these workflows quite nicely, and the stock profile can work half as a central of it. Do on the stock item have some extra comments fields that could be used for CFC information and pulled out into any of the layouts. So we do have a few more items there, but I'm starting to come to my half-an-hour limit. So I'm not gonna go and look at any of the other functionality, but we do have enhanced traceable item inquiry, for instance. So if you want to have a look at that, I'm more than happy to run that through separately with you. But Now, I would say thank you very much for joining me this morning. And if you have any questions, you can ask them now, or you can reach out to us directly or to your business partner for further information. So if you wanted to have any, or if you had any questions, please use the chat box. I'll be here for the next couple of minutes.